Hello, everybody. My name is Christian Dubeau. I am from Los Angeles, California. I'm a composer and a pianist and a keyboard player. I play both classical and rock. I compose mainly classical in the classical style. I also teach in a small private college in Hollywood, California.
Hi, I'm Mary B. Kaufman. I'm a visual artist. I paint. I live on the south side of the Alaska Range and Denali National Park. I've been here for 33 years and very passionate about the landscape here.
Hello, my name is Margo Klass. I live in Fairbanks, Alaska, and in my art world, I create artist books and box constructions. Like all of the elements, I am very connected to the landscape here, especially that of Denali National Park. And we are, all of us, so happy to have had the opportunity to work with the Composing in the Park program.
Okay, so July 2017 was my first time in Denali National Park, also my first time in Alaska, and I bought a shirt. Yeah. So what struck me most about Denali National Park was how undeveloped and how untouched it was by humans when compared to other parks, other national parks I had visited in the lower 48 states. And so my piece is appropriately titled "Savage" due to the wildness of Denali. And of course, that title was also partly inspired by the Savage River. So that's why I called it Savage and not Untamed or Wild or something like that. So there you go. So the beginning of the piece, you hear these big, fat, sonorous, dissonant chords, okay, with all the musical instruments playing together. And this is inspired by these massive mountains that you see from the piece that you see closest to the park road, okay? So that's the first section of the piece. And then the next section is inspired by Denali's rivers. So, and that's in that section you get more melodies and scales, and there's more motion in the music, okay? And throughout this river section, there are several pauses where you can hear the big chords, the block chords from the beginning of the piece, okay? And this was my attempt to represent someone's eyes wandering from the rivers to the mountains, back and forth, and things like this. And also, when I visited Denali, the mountains were shrouded by clouds the entire week that I was there. And I remember we kept on waiting for the clouds to dissipate so we could see the entire Alaska range, but that never happened. But there was a certain, like, just, it was cool to be shrouded by, to be in the clouds for an entire week and just looking at these mystical mountains. It was very nice. But so at the end of the piece, I go back to the section representing mountains, but the music is much quieter, and you hear these drum rolls, okay, these soft drum rolls that represent the clouds, and the quietness is supposed to depict the distant mountains that are shrouded by the clouds. So yeah, so that's my piece.
Well, the first time I heard Christian talk about his work was at the premiere performance, I believe, in the park. And we were all there. And Christian, you used a term that I had not heard before, but it resonated in what I heard in your music. And the term was harmonic texture. And I am not a musician at all, although I love music. And I took that term, and in my piece titled Evocations, I ran with that, and those massive chords that you hear, especially in the first part of your piece, but really all the way through, there are these what I call harmonic chord textures that I responded to, and I responded to them by these large um, limbs of birches that I use in the frontal part of my sculpture, and they are the dominant image in my piece. But behind, like you just said, you have some lyrical melodies behind. I used a piece of metal that has beautiful passages of texture and color to juxtapose those two things. And that's what I do in my work. I take found objects, in this case, both man-made and from the natural world, and combine them into a sculptural piece. And then in the lower register, I have what I called movement. And what you just said was wonderful to hear you describe it as your eyes moving back and forth from distant to close up. And that's what I was getting at with this little ball that resides behind these little uprights that actually could move back and forth. So that's sort of the backstory of my piece. And I think Mary B's is a little different, but ever so interesting.
Well, thank you, Margo. You guys had beautiful descriptions of this piece. And I felt very much the same way about those block chords. They were so strong, so they became a very important part of my piece as well. And my background is, although I was working with acrylic, because they're very strong and they dry fast, and I've been trying to get into abstractness in my work, I went back to my watercolor background and created a wash that represented, that kind of lyricalness in the back, but also the clouds, the grayness that you experienced in the park. And then over that, I used drips of India ink to kind of define what, chord-like shapes and a sense of, the clouds, and they come down to this kind of dark surface that overlaps yet another wash that's more yellow and ethereal with mountain shapes. And then at the base, I have yet another shape that is that represents movement and water, and again, little bits of block chords. It became, after about 15 iterations, this is what the piece became. And I usually show during this process the sketch that I did from the performance. And I always take a sketchbook with me and do sketches. That's kind of my immediacy, the reaction that I have to a piece. And it follows me through the whole process of developing the painting. But this is what I did for Christian's piece. So it was fairly literal. It was looking at the mountains and seeing what Christian had seen.
And that looks very similar to the picture that inspired the piece.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I went through at least 15 iterations trying to work from abstract and listening to the music over and over, and working with colors that I picked for this piece. And I came up with stuff that was very different than my final piece, just as my brain was trying to wrap itself around the music. And this was one of them.
Oh, wow.
Which is very different than the final piece that I chose. Because in the end, I wanted to tell the story. I wanted to tell your narrative and more succinctly the story of the music. So I ended up going back into my watercolor background and came up with this concept based on your description and the music and the strength of those block chords. So for me, this process was so evolutionary to allow me to express myself in so many ways, but yet try to focus in ultimately on your story and music, your narrative. So it was a remarkable experience. Much appreciated.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate both of what you guys did was beautiful. So thank you so much. I mean, just just the depth, the complexity of it. It was amazing, I thought. So thank you so much.
You know, one of the things that I still find remarkable every time I look at the two pieces juxtaposed as they are in the catalog, um, Mary B and I did not discuss this during the creative process, but look at how similar our compositions became, which
There's
I don't know.
vertical lines and the
Yes,
river,
and
horizontal,
the
wow.
horizontal registers like that. I think it's remarkable. And as I say, we had no communication of this in between, but I think it speaks to maybe the similarity with which we think aesthetically Mary B, but I also think it has to do with the strength of Christian's music and how loud and clear it comes across in terms of visual imagery. And that, if you intend that, you aced it.
Oh. No, that's very good to know. I mean, I saw that you know, you both had the you know, the vertical aspect of it and the horizontal aspect of it. You know, I saw the similarities, and that's actually the first thing that popped in my head was like, I wonder if they talked about it. But now, okay, well, wow, that's amazing.
And I find it amazing that I had to go through this whole process of that piece that I showed you was probably at one of my most emotional stages. It's like, I don't know what to do, you know, and I had to just, you know, settle myself down, leave my studio for a little bit, came back, and then I had to rethink, you know, what is the narrative here? What is, you know, what do I want to say? What does this music say to me? And that's when, you know, I kind of settled into the piece of art that was the finished piece. Yeah, a very strong piece of music. It really made an impact.
It was powerful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Powerful.
It's good to know. Yeah, I mean, I just like everyone else, I composed this piece in 3 days on a little bench in Coal Creek. So it's good to know that it made such an impact. You know.
Yeah, you guys amaze us. The fact that you had so little time and came up with such amazing pieces is just speaks volumes to your skill, to the, you know, impact of the environment and the landscape as well. But being able to put that all together is just extraordinary. I mean, I took forever.
You know,
it's a very, oh, sorry, go ahead, Margo. I'm sorry.
For each one of us, I think it was a process of distillation. And I think of that often in my own work. I worked abstractly from the get-go. And it was interesting to hear you, Mary B, talk about getting from A to B in 15 iterations. But I do the same kind of thing, but working with the objects, and I play with them and put them on a grid and see how they look together. And then I start taking things away one by one. And if what I'm trying to say is said with fewer pieces, fine, or then I add them back in. But it is that process of distillation. And meanwhile, the music is going in the background and you come to it somehow. And it's so interesting that we came to something so similar. It's a joy to see.